Tonight on the all-night drive-in picture show.
What you can get for this, don't you, young blood?
I'm already a murderer, so I might as well be famous.
Then,
Foul! White cock man! What do you mean foul? You stuck your finger up that cock, son. I was told if you stick your finger up there, rub his balls a little bit, then it puts their life in your chick. Who told you that? My daddy did.
and now, here are your projectionists, almost to the end of the restraining order, Ryan Mason and Charles Wood.
Welcome to the all-night drive-in picture show. I'm Ryan. That's Charles.
Hi.
Let's go.
Attention patrons. The movies discussed on this podcast will be spoiled from start to finish. If you wish to experience these cinematic gems visually, please do so before continuing with this episode. We will be right here when you return. Thank you, and have a pleasant evening.
And now, please enjoy our feature presentation.
All the names are real, but the events have been changed to protect the myths. This is Dillinger.
I'd like to withdraw my entire account.
Your entire account?
Yes, ma'am, the whole thing.
And your name?
John Dillinger.
It was a war. And like in any war, there were legends. Glorifying heroes and villains alike. But somehow the most glorified of all was the nation's deadliest public enemy. Academy Award winner Ben Johnson as Melvin Purvis, the FBI bloodhound on his trail. Academy Award winner Cloris Leachman as the mysterious Lady in Red. Michelle Phillips as Billy Frechette, the girl who was ready to share every moment with Dillinger, except his last. And Warren Oates as the man whose treacherous cunning baffled every law officer in the Midwest.
These few dollars you lose here today, they're gonna buy you stories to tell your children, your great-grandchildren. This could be one of the big moments in your life. Don't make it your last.
Indiana, 1933. Fellow Hoosier John Dillinger and his gang are holding up a small-town bank. He's stern, but he also wants you to know that it's a big deal being held up by his gang because they're the best there is. He gives this piece of advice to the teller. This could be one of the big moments of your life. Don't make it your last. G-Man Melvin Purvis, played by Ben Johnson, tells us a story about how 5 of his men were ambushed that same year escorting a gangster named Frank Nash to jail. With the backing of J. Edgar Hoover, Purvis made it his life's mission to avenge his fallen comrades and take down gangsters. Dillinger's gang consists of Homer Van Meter, played by Harry Dean Stanton, Harry Pierpont, played by Jeffrey Lewis, and Charles Mackley, played by John P. Ryan, along with their getaway driver Eddie Martin, played by John Martino. Purvis wants them all dead, legal or not. He was given a box of cigars for his birthday by a murdered lawman, and he intends to smoke one over every gangster's body that he kills.
It's not an oral fetish or anything. It's
Right.
just a love of cigars and other men. No problem.
No problem. The Dillinger gang are traveling the region looking for banks to knock over. Most of the banks are closed either for the day or for good. The only thing they've been able to knock over is a cranky gas station attendant's gumball machine.
That dude didn't give a damn.
No, he didn't care who they were.
He didn't care who they were. He didn't care what kind of guns they had. Even when they knocked over the gumball machine, didn't they take a couple shots at his window or something? He's just like, I don't
he
give
just
a shit.
no-sold him.
Yeah, I'm in a ghost town. Like,
At a bar, Dillinger meets Billy Frechette, played by Michelle Phillips from the 60s band The Mamas and the Papas. According to Billy, she's a half-Native American prostitute, and she doesn't know who he is, because she totally looks like a Native American. blonde and blue eyes and all that. Yeah.
Like, she actually claimed, I think, to be half Cherokee to get this part.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody's half Cherokee until the DNA test comes in.
Yeah.
You know, until you get your 23andMe packet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I thought.
Oh, you mean I'm English? Oh, okay.
Yeah. You mean I'm 100% Irish? Oh, okay. Well, I'll be damned.
Yeah. This greatly upsets him, and he begins firing off his gun and letting everyone in the bar know who John Dillinger is. He makes them throw their money on the bar and tells Billy she's coming with him. He makes her grab the money. Before he leaves, he tells the patrons that he's John Dillinger, and they should never forget it. He then tosses their money on the floor on his way out as they scurry to collect their cash.
It's like the most pointless robbery scene ever.
No kidding. Yeah.
I'm going to take all your money. No, I'm not.
I'll scare the shit out of you, and then I'm going to throw money at you. Yeah, makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah. Dillinger takes Billy back to his motel room.
This here is Harry Pierpoint. Homer Van Meter, Charlie Mackley. That's Eddie, he's the driver. Thieves and killers. You heard of it?
Sure.
This is Billy Frechette. She's an engine. Don't ever give her a drink.
Good Lord.
I know.
Good Lord.
An engine. Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
He takes her back to his room and tosses her on the bed and tells her not to move. Harry isn't pleased that Dillinger is bringing a woman back and that women are nothing but trouble, he says as his lady friend Mary, played by Ann Alt, looks over his shoulder grinning. Dillinger calls her a whore and she slaps him. He tells her not to do that again, and she says not to call her a whore. He says there's nothing wrong with being a whore if you get the right price. She slaps him again. He rips off her dress. She slaps him again, and he cold cocks her in the face.
Man.
Harry hears the action and predicts a woman will be Dillinger's downfall.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
You know, from what I've read, like Dillinger and Frechette's relationship was not really abusive.
Yeah.
I don't know if Milius is portraying it that way here because maybe the research available at the time said differently, or because he has a low opinion of women, or maybe a little bit of both.
Right.
But regardless of the reasons behind it, I mean, I think Michelle Phillips is good as Billy, even though Milius kind of makes her out to be this woman who learns to love Dillinger after he beats her up and kidnaps her enough times.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense to me. So the women aren't treated particularly well in this movie at all.
No.
And neither is the truth, oddly. Women and truth are two casualties of Dillinger. So it's a good movie, but I do think maybe I should just mention it now. Probably next week on the short reel for the three of you that listen to it. We're going to go into the myths of this movie versus the reality, because the chasm between those two things is vast.
Yeah.
It's huge. So what they did here, I think, makes for a good movie, but sometimes the truth actually would have made an even better movie, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Meanwhile, Purvis is attempting to take down the tri-state terror, Wilbur Underhill. Wilbur and his new wife are holed up in an old farmhouse.
I'm sorry, the tri-state terror, Wilbur Underhill. He'll sell you insurance and then burn your house down.
Right.
So you can collect.
As Purvis arrives, he's informed that his men fired on the house for 15 straight minutes and they're assumed to be dead. Purvis puts on a bulletproof vest, lights up a stogie, and walks toward the house with a gun in each hand.
He has somebody light up his cigar.
His cigar. Yeah. From the outside of the house, we hear several gunshots. Wilbur walks out, riddled with wounds, and collapses to the ground. Purvis carries his dead wife out, claiming that Wilbur killed her because he couldn't live without her. Which makes no sense.
Especially in this movie. I like this scene, though, because it does remind me of the shootout at the end of that James Cagney movie, Public Enemy.
Yeah.
The Public Enemy, I should say. At the end of that movie, or towards the end of that movie, he is in the rain looking across the street at this building. I think it's a club or something like that. But he goes in and shoots all these gangsters, but you just stay across the street watching. He goes in and does all of it, and then he comes back out. It's such a great scene.
That's
and
cool.
This scene reminds me of that. There's also a scene like that in the Limey at the warehouse, or the loading dock or whatever. So I like this scene for that reason.
Mary says Billy wants to go back to her reservation and Dillinger doesn't know about it. Harry says Dillinger isn't going to be happy about it, but Mary takes her away. The Dillinger gang enters a First National Bank in Chicago. The robbery goes south quickly. They leave with cash, but an officer that was inside the bank shoots Charlie multiple times. Homer kills the officer on the way out. As they're making their getaway, Eddie the driver is freaking out and not paying attention to the road. He mows over a lady crossing the street, which is very brutal.
That's brutal, man.
Yeah.
That looks so real.
It does. It does. They round the corner and the police have blocked the road and they begin to open fire on the gang. Harry bails out of the car before Eddie crashes and rolls it. A wounded Eddie gets out of the car and he and Harry fire on the police, killing a few. Dillinger and the rest of the gang pull up in another car and join the fray. Eddie is gunned down. Harry jumps in Dillinger's car and they escape.
It's a really, really well put together scene.
It is, yeah.
That I guess Milius said that he made this movie so that he could show studios that he could cut together action sequences.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, mission accomplished, bud.
Yeah, bang up job. Really good.
The big takeaway for me from this movie, besides the solid performance, is how deftly he does construct shootouts and action scenes. And he always has solid logistics in those scenes, because somebody who isn't much of an action director, sometimes you can kind of get lost in a scene and not know who's aiming at who and who's shooting at who, and things can get a little weird. But he takes care of it so well here that even though everything's chaotic, I never felt lost at all.
Right.
Which is a high compliment for somebody who's, I think this was might have been his first film as a director.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Cut to the next scene as Dillinger finds Billy in a motorhome on a reservation and takes her away, kicking and screaming. Yeah, just come on, kidnap her. Yeah, it's good.
Well, yeah, she's going to love him.
Sure.
She's going to learn to love him very fast.
And pretty quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
The gang splits up and heads west. Charlie has taken a gut shot and knows he's out of time. Dillinger and Billy bury him in the country in a grave only marked by a $20 bill. Purvis is closing in on another gangster, Machine Gun Kelly. He and his wife are in bed as Purvis unloads a Tommy gun round into the bed and doesn't hit either one of them. Kelly begs Purvis not to kill them and surrenders, calling him G-Man, short for government man. Purvis loves the moniker and says Hoover will too. Dillinger and Billy have inexplicably gotten close as they moved out west. They talk about how he always wanted to be a bank robber, even as a child.
See that out there?
Where? It's all desert to me.
No, there's a town out there. Just about the horizon. That right there, that's Mexico.
Mexico. It's just waiting.
Yep. All my life I want to be a bank robber. Carry a gun, wear a mask. Now that it's happened, I guess I'm just about the best bank robber they ever had. And I sure am happy.
Is that what you wanted to be when you were a kid?
Yep. My buddies wanted to be firemen or farmers or policemen, something like that. Not me. I just want to steal people's money.
I bet you wanted to have your picture in every post office, too.
Sure did. All we got to do, Billy, is drive down that road. We got $70,000 in the bank.
You could do it if you wanted to, Johnny.
All the way to Guadalajara. Live the rest of my life like a pharaoh.
Even the pharaohs don't live in Mexico.
Yeah. But then he says, nah.
Nah.
Billy adds, yeah, what would your public think? Which gives Dillinger a hearty guffaw. The G-Man moves on to his next gangster, handsome Jack Clutis. He's waiting in Clutis' apartment as he returns home. Clutis opens the door, Purvis identifies himself as FBI, Clutis fumbles for his gun, and Purvis unloads his gun into Clutis' torso. The gang is attending a Tucson hoedown, wearing nice suits and hats, their ladies looking gorgeous and their cars shiny. This tips off the local police, and the sheriff wants his deputies to get a closer look at them because obviously they must be criminals since they're clean.
Good Lord.
Yeah. The sheriff consults a crime magazine and identifies their faces, walks up behind Dillinger and puts a gun in his back and says,
"It's a 12 gauge, Mr. Dillinger. I'm Big Jim Willard. I've killed 35 men in my day, and I wouldn't mind if you were number 36. So let's go, Sonny."
I've killed 35 men in my day, and I wouldn't mind making you number 36.
That's right, Big Jim.
Big Jim arrests Dillinger and Billy. Harry and Homer make their escapes. Harry tells Mary to meet him in St. Paul. A montage of newspaper headlines proclaim that Dillinger will be transferred to a jail in Crown Point, Indiana. "No jail can hold me," says Dillinger.
I like the alias that Dillinger uses in the scene, Art Long.
Yeah.
That's interesting because 10 years after this movie was made, Warren Oates was in a movie with Dennis Quaid called Tough Enough. And Dennis Quaid in that movie is the main character, and he plays a character named Art Long. So that's kind of funny.
Or if that's like a wink and a nod.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I like Harry's alias, Sam Phillips. I thought that was funny, too.
Yeah. A sandbag barricade has been built around the Lake County Jail. The military is on hand with their guns drawn. A huge crowd is formed outside to witness the arrival of John Dillinger.
John Dillinger.
The most infamous man in America. Dillinger enters with a smile. He entertains the press, answering their questions.
Why'd you wear the hat, Johnny? Are you going collegiate?
Somebody stole my hat.
What do you think about the president, Johnny?
I like him. I like the New Deal, and I like the NRA. I like especially the help he's been giving the banks lately.
What about Social Security?
Well, it could run the country. If people want money, they ought to go to work.
Did you kill Patrolman O'Malley?
I never killed anybody in my life. I just steal money.
You've been known to carry a gun and use it.
Well, it is dangerous work.
What do you think of this jail?
No, it's a nice place. Nice people. Ain't no jail to hold me. It's an exercise in futility.
Say that again?
It's an exercise in futility.
What do you think of the DA?
I like him. I like the police commissioner, too. I think we're all going to live along fine here, don't you, ma'am? How do you do?
Put your arm around him, Mr. Estel.
I love how he says, I don't like Social Security because people should work for a living or something like that. It's like, what's your definition of work, sir?
Right.
Please enlighten us.
Work for a living so you can take their money from the bank? Yeah.
I think he said something, too, about how he liked how FDR has been supporting the banks lately, especially. And it's like, dude, okay.
Purvis doesn't like his placement in the newspaper. Dillinger gets all the headlines while he's relegated to the second column. He thinks he needs to make more public appearances and meet the people to up his profile. While getting his shoes shined, he sees two boys playing cops and robbers.
Hey, kid. Kid, that's right, you. What are you playing?
Cops and robbers.
What are you, the cop or the robber?
Robber.
Oh, crime doesn't pay. I bet your dad told you that.
I ain't got no dad.
Sorry to hear that. Every kid should have a dad. You know who I am?
No.
You really don't know who I am?
No.
I'm Melvin Purvis, the G-Man.
You ain't him.
Want to see my badge? I bet you'd like to see my gun.
Yeah.
I got to unload it. Not that I don't trust you, but if something happened, I'd always think of you when I looked at a little boy.
You got a little boy, too?
No, sir. I'm like you. I don't have anybody. Here, hold it. How's it feel?
Feels heavy.
When you grow up, it won't feel heavy. You can have one just like it. You can have a badge, too.
Wouldn't want to be a G-man.
Well, why not?
Have to go to school to be a G-man.
Well, you gotta go to school.
John Dillinger don't go to school.
John Dillinger's in jail.
That was a really good scene, I thought.
That really was.
Yeah.
It really was. Ben Johnson's amazing as this version of Melvin Purvis.
The inflated superhero, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he plays it in a way where you feel like he believes it on a certain level, but I think that this version of Purvis that he plays is poignant because he actually does something that we wouldn't have gotten if they had cast Purvis being closer to his real age at the time. Purvis was like 30 or 31 when this was going on, and whereas Ben Johnson was like 54, I think. So
I look 10 years older than that.
Yeah. But I think getting this version of Purvis in the movie is interesting because he seems like a guy who's almost, in a way, a more brazen version of Tommy Lee Jones' character in No Country for Old Men, where he has this certain code that he is living by. Then he looks around and he thinks he knows the score, but there are scenes like this to show him that he really doesn't know the score, that he thinks that he's perceived in a better light in the wider world than John Dillinger, and in reality, he's not.
Yeah.
Dillinger's become the hero because the times are changing.
Meanwhile, Dillinger is carving a gun out of a bar of soap and painting it black with shoe polish. Two guards bring him his dinner, and he sticks the bar of ivory in one guard's neck. They open the cell, he shoves one guard in the cell and takes a shotgun, walking the other guard down the aisle. On the way out, an African-American prisoner named Reed Youngblood, played by Frank McRae, introduces himself to Dillinger. Reed killed his wife and a Bible salesman after catching them in flagrante delicto. I think that might be Latin for hibbity-dibbity. I'm not sure.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Dillinger orders the guard to let Reed out. They catch the warden and another guard entering. Reed takes the gun from the guard, and Dillinger puts his shotgun into the warden's back and walks him out into the jail's motor pool. Dillinger has the mechanic point out the fastest car in the garage. He orders the guards to let the military still stationed outside the jail know that he is taking the warden with him and there should be no funny business, otherwise he will cut up the warden like spaghetti. He orders the mechanic to drive them out as Dillinger and Reed make their escape with the warden in tow.
How does he eat spaghetti, I wonder? He must not roll it.
Must not.
He cuts it up.
Yeah,
okay.
makes his own, I guess. Yeah.
He's not Italian.
Nope.
He's a gangster, but he's not Italian.
That's true. No sooner are they out of sight from the jailhouse, Dillinger sees a bank and can't help himself. He orders the mechanic to stop the car and back into an alley. He wants to give the tellers a big moment in their lives.
Hold it! Is it? Whatever you're doing, ladies and gentlemen, stop. This is a robbery. I'm John Dillinger. Most recently on display now at your local jail. Don't be nervous. Don't do anything you regret. This is going to be one of the big days in your life. Don't make it your last. Psych it up, honey.
While he's robbing them, trucks full of soldiers drive past the bank, not knowing that they are passing the gangster. The warden asks Reed if he knows what will happen if they catch him. Reed says he's already a murderer. He might as well be famous. Further down the road, in the middle of the country, Dillinger parts ways with the warden, mechanic, and Reed. He wants to split the money with him, take a larger portion for himself since he's a professional and all. At first, the warden balks, but after the mechanic accepts his cash, the warden decides that maybe he should take the money. Depression and all, you know.
Is it the mechanic the whole time is going, I've never seen such gall?
Yeah.
I also like, too, when Dillinger's in the bank, he rattles off his spiel that he rattled off at the top of the film.
Yeah.
But this time, it's tired, and it's a little more rickety, and it's unsure, and you kind of know things are starting to fall apart a bit for him.
He says it, but not with the confidence he did at the beginning of the movie.
Right. There's very little showmanship
right.
in this version of it. So
Dillinger tells Reed that he's leaving him behind because he isn't a pro, and Reed accepts that.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
You're not a pro. All right.
Yeah.
I'll just go back to jail.
I'll send you something at Christmas. How is he going to find him? I don't. He tells him that I'll send you something at Christmas. How?
Yeah.
Where am I going?
The warden offers to take Reed off death row if he comes back with him. Reed ponders it for a second as Dillinger is driving away, throws his money in the air and runs after Dillinger, saying he doesn't care if he dies. He wants to go with him and hops in the car.
But why throw the money away?
Yeah, makes no sense.
He just throws it and goes bounding across like Johnny's going to share his wad with him. I don't think so.
Right. Dillinger drives up to the house and Billy comes running out the front door. They embrace and kiss as she leaves with him, because of course she does.
Yeah.
Later, Dillinger calls Purvis on the payphone to check in.
Hello, Melvin?
Yes, hello.
This is John Dillinger.
Well, now, how are you, Johnny?
I always felt that, we ought to talk occasionally.
Good. I'd like to hear from you.
I understand that you've been, that you got me on driving a stolen car across the state line. Is that right? Federal offense. That's what the paper said.
That's right, kid. Not much for a man of your ability.
How'd you like the crash out?
Liked it fine, Johnny.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
I've always wanted it that way. Gives me a chance.
How many men you got on me now, Melvin?
2, Johnny. 2 good ones.
You and J. Edgar Hoover, huh?
That's right, kid.
Well, that's fine. That's fine, Melvin. I like a man with confidence.
Call whenever you like.
Sure been nice talking to you.
You can reverse the charges if you need, kid.
Bye! Son of a bitch.
I love how Oates plays this scene, because there's actually a little mini scene that we didn't talk about here between this and when he picks Billy up, and it's when they're in bed together. She says something about not wanting to be there at the end with him, and he's talking about how he's mortal or whatever. And I like that, because then when he talks to Purvis on this line, he starts out as like this cocky smartass, and then he starts to get angrier and angrier and angrier. And in these two moments, you see him kind of being vulnerable in a way.
Yeah.
Kind of the same way that the second version of his speech was less assured. You're starting to see how this guy could really come apart if the right events line up.
Right. From there, he and Billy visit his father's home, where his family is there to meet them. His father shakes his hand and says that he doesn't agree with him breaking the law, but since times are hard and people seem to love him, he welcomes his son home. Dillinger and Billy meet up with the gang. Reed is there wearing a sweet purple suit. They're about to have dinner with Pretty Boy Floyd, played by Steve Canale, and Babyface Nelson, played by Richard Dreyfuss. There's a plan in place for them all to work together. Floyd is ready to play ball, but Nelson isn't keen on taking orders from anyone.
Lester Nelson, John Dillinger.
Nelson. Babyface Nelson, huh?
I don't like to be called that. We might as well get that straight right away.
Well, I'll try to remember that.
All right. One thing. If we're going to work together, I want it understood that I don't take no orders.
I believe this is Mr. Dillinger's gang.
He ain't my leader. I got my own way of taking banks. I come in shooting, I kill everyone in sight, I grab the dough. Very easy. Works very well. You don't like it, you get somebody else.
I'll tell you what. Let you and me go out there and talk about that.
Anything you want, Buster.
Lester.
Shut up.
Dillinger wants a meeting with him away from the dinner as they walk down by the river. Nelson pulls his gun, but Dillinger knees him in the gut and takes the gun from him and proceeds to scare the shit out of him.
There's one thing you gotta learn, kid.
Yeah?
You wanna kill me? You wanna kill me, punk? You can't kill me, punk! Get out! Stop it! Get out! Get out! Punk! Leave me alone! Leave me alone! Punk! Leave me alone! I'm immortal! Punk! Here! Take it, punk! Take it! Pull the trigger! You can't do it! You can't do it, can you? I'm immortal, you punk! I'm Dillinger!
Man, Dreyfuss is something in this scene.
Yeah.
Man. He is a mad dog in this movie.
He is.
He's quick and he's volatile, and he goes from being this like touchy ass to blubbering and begging for his life just so seamlessly.
Yeah.
And also now here too, right away, we're getting this public image then of Dillinger screaming at Babyface Nelson that he's immortal, when we've just seen 2 examples or 3 examples of how there are some dents here in his myth, and they're already falling apart. But it's almost like he's screaming that at Babyface Nelson almost as much for himself as he is for Nelson's benefit.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So,
from there, a montage of newspaper headlines calls them a super gang, and we see Nelson in the pictures with the group. There are multiple shootouts with the police. Dillinger is proclaimed public enemy number 1. The G-Man and his team are hot on their trail. At a bank heist in South Bend, Indiana, an alarm goes off, and Nelson is eager to kill someone. He sees a policeman across the street and a group of people, so he opens fire with his machine gun, killing the cop and all the innocent people surrounding him.
God.
Vicious.
Yeah, no kidding.
Totally vicious. Billy wants to someday go dancing with Dillinger again. He says that they will go to Chicago that night and go dancing. She says he can't go to Chicago, but Dillinger does what he wants.
He does what he wants.
I do what I want. It just so happens that the restaurant they attend is also being attended by Melvin Purvis. Purvis sends them a magnum of champagne and a note that says that since his fiancée is in attendance, he will pursue Dillinger another day. Dillinger makes eye contact with Purvis and declines the champagne. As Purvis and his fiancée dance, we see Dillinger and Billy have left the restaurant. Kind of a dick measuring scene, but still a good one.
It is. It's funny, though. It's kind of like they go to Chicago, and the one restaurant
right.
that Dillinger and Billy go to
just so happens.
Melvin Purvis just happens to be there. You know.
Yeah. Well, Chicago's a small town, so, you know.
I mean, I guess so. Right? It's a tiny little place.
Tiny little place.
I think it's got, 2 stoplights now? They just got another stoplight, I think. So
yeah.
I hear, though, you can get a magnum of really great popsicles in Chicago.
Oh, that's right.
Which we'll see later on.
We will, yeah.
Good Lord.
I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But then I remembered, the popsicle scene. Yeah,
the popsicle scene.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Welcome to Dillinger, where we're going to talk about the popsicle scene.
Yeah. They're nice and cold. Dillinger and his team get a little sloppy in Iowa. Homer is spotted by a sheriff in his car outside of a bank. While the gang are holding up the bank, the sheriff's team of cops and locals surrounds the bank. Harry is first to come out of the bank, and the team lights him up with bullets, but he's wearing a vest. A bloody gunfight ensues. Reed is panicking and ends up getting shot to death. A hired gun in Dillinger's gang takes a gut shot, and Floyd picks him up and puts him in the getaway car. The gang escapes yet again and meet up at a large boarding house in Mason City, Iowa. As they are unloading the wounded gangsters and making a fair amount of ruckus, a man sleeping in a car sees him and alerts the authorities.
I think that joint is supposed to be Little Bohemia again.
Oh, okay.
I think it's supposed to be the same place where they had that dinner, but I don't know for sure.
Could be, yeah. Purvis's pants tighten at the thought of having Dillinger's gang, Floyd and Nelson, all in one spot like sitting ducks, and his team sets out. At dawn, Purvis's team has arrived, and they are ready to kill some gangsters. They move in on foot, waiting for daylight so they can ID the gangsters and not shoot each other. Purvis lights a stogie at sunrise, and the bullets begin to fly. They pepper the house with lead as the gang returns fire and gets the better of the G-men. Billy is shot in the foot. Floyd puts the wounded gangster out of his misery and then climbs onto the balcony of the house and starts lobbing grenades at the G-men, blowing up vehicles and humans. Floyd is off the roof and flees on foot. Nelson jumps in the car and drives to the front of the house so the gangsters can make their escape. Harry is shot in the leg by Purvis on his way out. Nelson, Harry, and Homer flee in one car as Dillinger begins to exit the house. Billy covers him with a machine gun as he attempts his escape. Dillinger escapes into the woods on foot. The gunfight is over and the landscape is littered with dead cops. Billy is arrested and Purvis, ever the gentleman, carries her to the car. She says he will never capture Dillinger, but he assures her that he will.
She covers him with the machine gun and a shrill scream.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, she screamed so loud, I had to turn the radio down in here in the projection booth. It was too loud. I saw people throwing their speakers out of their windows.
Oh, my God.
Stuff out here. It was almost a riot. This is another well-edited and paced action scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Milius really balances everything so well here that just when I was thinking about, oh, I wonder what's going on with this character or that character, he would go to that person.
Right.
And I really like that because this is a scene that could have gotten really confusing really fast.
Oh, yeah.
And he did a really great job of balancing all that out.
Yeah.
That scream.
I'm surprised she had a singing voice left after that.
I know, man. That was really, that was loud.
Yeah, it was. Back in Nelson's car, Harry is bleeding out and crying for Mary. They begin to cross the bridge, but the cops have blocked the exit. Another shootout begins. Homer takes a bullet to the arm. Harry exits the car, ready to surrender, but is shot in the chest and falls off the bridge to his death. Nelson backs out of the bridge and whips his car around, sending Homer flying out of an open door to the ground. Nelson takes off without him. Homer escapes on foot. Two cops file in behind Nelson as he's driving away. Nelson shoots at one car as it pulls up beside him and sends that car rolling down a hill. The other car bumps Nelson off the road into a field and his car rolls onto its side. Nelson climbs out of the car as the two cops walk up on his car. Nelson shoots one down and he and the other cop have a shootout, killing each other. Night falls and Dillinger jumps into a moving train car.
There's a lot of such and such escapes on foot in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for once it would be really cool to see a movie where you see what happens when they escape on foot.
Yeah.
That could be the whole movie. It's just them traveling. Because Harry is always the guy that when there's a shootout, he looks at them and says, hey, we'll meet up in Grand Rapids, or hey, let's meet up in Tucson, or hey, we go into Des Moines next, yo.
Yeah.
Like he's always there with a place, but then you never really get to see that journey.
Yeah.
I think that journey would be interesting.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Lewis was so great as Harry.
I was just getting ready to say, I know we've discussed this in Night of the Comet, but pour one out for Jeffrey Lewis.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
He's
what
like
a talent.
He's like an anchor throughout the movie. I remember when I saw this the first time, when he panicked and got out of the car and was shot and fell over the side of the bridge and died. That's when I started worrying about the main characters, like the gangsters like Dillinger and those guys, because he was the guy that kind of felt like the glue that held us all together. When he was gone, I thought, oh no, Harry's gone. How am I going to know if we're supposed to go to Boise or Sheboygan? I mean, I'm going to be totally lost. Those towns aren't close together, I don't think.
Yeah, no kidding.
So.
The next day, Homer sneaks into the back seat of a car of a man wearing a fur coat named Leroy and forces him to drive.
Leroy, who is attempting to rape his girlfriend in the front seat of the car in broad daylight.
Yes.
This is the one innocent shithead that I was hoping would get it from a gangster.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Floyd is still on foot. He approaches an old farmhouse and tells the owner that he's lost, needs food, and wants to buy an old jalopy sitting on their property. The man of the house pulls a shotgun and says the car doesn't run. They recognize him, and he assures them that he wants no trouble. They invite him inside. Meanwhile, Leroy's car runs out of gas in a small town. He pulls over and looks in the tank and says it's bone dry.
Dry. Bone dry. Must be something wrong with the gauge.
Better be right, boy. Get your ass over there.
Look for yourself.
Homer doesn't believe him and starts to shake the back end of the car when Leroy hops in and drives away.
Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch!
Homer fires 3 shots at the car.
Son of a bitch. Oh, God, things ain't working out for me.
This alarms the locals, and several men come running out of their businesses with guns.
Just a bunch of goddamn farmers.
He starts firing on them, but they fire back, and Homer takes a slug to the gut.
Oh, son of a bitch! Oh, help me, somebody! God damn it! Things ain't working out for me.
As he lay on the ground moaning, the men surround him.
Oh, I think I'm shot in the lungs. Will you get a doctor, please?
They fill Homer full of lead instead.
Man.
That was crazy.
That was nuts.
So these men are surrounding him, laying on the ground, and when they start opening fire, it's just a cloud of smoke that rises.
Yeah, smoke and dust, because it's like a dusty street.
Yeah, it's really a cool-looking scene.
Isn't that his thing throughout the end of his last part of the movie here for him? Is like, things ain't working out too well for old Homer.
It's a very Coen Brothers type line. Yeah, he
it really
says
is.
it 2 or 3 times.
It really did. Yeah, you're right. It felt a lot like a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
Poor old Homer.
It's like, we're in a tight spot.
I can't believe he fell for the bone dry gas tank bit.
Yeah.
And Leroy got away.
Right. The one guy that should have taken a shot to the head.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Ugh, him and his stupid fur coat.
Yeah.
Jackass.
Floyd's having a nice breakfast with the farmers when Purvis and the G-men arrive. They cock their guns. The lady of the house offers him a Bible to confess his sins. He said he is a sinner and he's enjoyed every minute of it and never killed anyone that didn't deserve it. He thanks them for their hospitality and climbs out the window. He makes a mistake of running through an open field in a straight line. He should have zigzagged, man. Zigzag.
Always zigzag.
Yeah, man. Purvis and his men fire and take down the great pretty boy Floyd. Purvis approaches Floyd, and Floyd says he's glad it was Purvis that got him before he died.
Such macho romantic bullshit.
Yeah.
Such bullshit.
Yeah. Dillinger is the last man standing. He drives a stolen car to his father's home. His sister comes running out to meet him, but he turns the car around and drives away. Purvis speaks to a madam named Anna Sage, played by the great Cloris Leachman.
Yes.
Cloris Leachman, people. She runs a whorehouse. She's an illegal alien with a criminal record, but doesn't fear being deported because she's got dirt on a lot of powerful people. Purvis assures her that he isn't concerned about that. He just needs her help. She said a month ago Dillinger rented an apartment from her and took a shine to a prostitute that looked like an Indian gal.
Oh, God. Whew.
A blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indian gal.
Yeah, absolutely. She's half jerky.
Yeah, it was Billy. He took them both to the movies, and she was very fond of him. Anna asked that Purvis doesn't hurt him, and Purvis says that in a weird way, he's very fond of him, too. They eat popsicles.
I hear that's how you seal a deal in Romania. It's with popsicles. It's
so
like
he's got a bucket full of ice like you would for a bottle of champagne or something, but it's full of popsicles, and they're in a fancy restaurant.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, was that the dessert du jour that day? Was a bucket of popsicles?
Well, and he offers her one, and she says no, and he says, doesn't he say something like they're mighty cold or something
mighty
like
cold,
that?
very refreshing.
Yeah. And then she's like, okay. I'm like, I wouldn't take a popsicle in a nice restaurant, so that just seems like a whole roofie situation to me.
No kidding. Purvis buys a ticket to see a movie at the Biograph Theater in Chicago. He has several men stationed outside the theater. He has hired Anna to take Dillinger to the movies. As the theater empties, Purvis casually crosses the street. He tells another G-man to let Hoover know he's going to take Dillinger down himself. Dillinger, Anna, and Billy exit the theater. Purvis lights a cigar and stands in the shadows. He calls out to Dillinger. Dillinger pushes Billy and Anna out of the way and fumbles for his gun. Purvis shoots Dillinger multiple times as Billy screams, "A lot."
A lot.
In the epilogue, we learned that Anna was deported back to Romania in 1935. Friends like these, huh? Yeah. Billy and John Dillinger Sr. toured the country in a traveling show called Crime Does Not Pay, and she died in 1969 on an Indian reservation. Purvis quit the FBI after the Dillinger case and went into private business before committing suicide with the same gun he killed Dillinger with in 1961.
One thing I found really interesting in the actual scene outside the biograph that actually did happen was that the theater manager thought that Purvis and his guys were a bunch of hoods, so he called the cops. And so then the cops came, and then Purvis had to explain to them, no, we're actually here to ice John Dillinger or whatever. And the cops were like, oh, okay. And then they told the theater manager, hey, just let it go.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting bit of truth that actually, for one, made it through the Milius filter, but also something that's very good and added just a little bit of tension to this final scene.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed the movie for what it was. I mean,
Absolutely.
Even though it was definitely a falsified document.
Oates was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
Oates probably looked the most like John Dillinger.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I thought he was better than Depp.
Yeah.
I like Johnny Depp a lot, but
He's too pretty.
Yeah, and I just think Oates has a more of a grittier gravity than Johnny Depp has.
Yeah.
Depp can be gritty, but there's always still a little bit of finesse in there. And Oates just was like, he kind of played the part in his feet and in his gut a little bit for me.
Yeah.
More than Depp did. Plus, just objectively, he just looks more like Dillinger than any other actor that's played him. Because there have been a bunch of actors who played him, probably 8 or 10 maybe over the years. So Oates was fantastic, as always.
Oh, as always.
And Ben Johnson's amazing.
Yeah.
The whole cast was great.
Yeah, everyone on Dillinger's team, spot on. You know?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Lewis, Harry Dean Stanton, for God's sake. I mean,
right.
Come on. You can't lose with those two anyway.
Right. Dreyfuss was crazy.
Dreyfuss has always been great at playing like a sarcastic crank, but in this movie, man, he was just a raw nerve.
He scared me.
Oh, yeah.
In this movie. And the only other time I can say that Dreyfuss came close to kind of scaring me was in the original cut of Close Encounters, like the really dark cut where he's really going nuts, and Spielberg kind of shows a little more about how he goes nuts in that movie. It's the only other time he ever really got to me. But this movie, man, every time I saw him, I just thought, oh, man, somebody's going to die as soon as this guy shows up on screen.
Oh, yeah.
So
he definitely expected it a lot more out of him than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I thought Michelle Phillips was great.
Yeah.
And Cloris Leachman was great. She was only in it for, not even 5 minutes, but
she's Cloris Leachman.
She is. I think she should have got the Judi Dench Academy Award for that.
Yeah.
But it's a good movie for what it is. I mean, it's just as a gangster movie. Actually, if you took all of the Dillinger stuff off of it, all the real names off of it, I think I would have responded to this movie more positively after looking into it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I've always really liked this movie, even though I don't really like John Milius. I'm just not a fan of him as a person.
Yeah.
But I do think that he does some really good work. I mean, I thought that the work that he did on Apocalypse Now was really good. I know you don't really dig Apocalypse Now. But,
yeah, it's not my thing.
But yeah, I thought this movie was good. Definitely a good first outing or early outing for a director who's wanting to get into action movies.
Yeah.
Guy definitely knew what he was doing.
Definitely.
As far as that goes. But
you want to remake it, or is it a Rembrandt?
There have been so many movies made about Dillinger over the years that I don't really think that it's really necessary.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, if you can't get Oates to play him, then it shouldn't be tried again.
It's true.
Though some jackass is going to try it again.
And since he's dead, it's not going to happen anyway. So
right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's a Rembrandt. I think the closest we would have gotten to some sort of objective movie about Dillinger was the Michael Mann movie. And I didn't really dig that movie. I just thought it I don't know, something didn't work.
No, it was dull.
It was. And, I think the fact that he shot it in such a transparently digital format,
right,
for me, kind of took me out of the movie a bit.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably like the best shot that we had at getting another decent Dillinger movie. I hope I'm wrong about that, but
yeah,
I can't imagine saying, hey, let's remake Dillinger, because it's been made so many times before and since this movie that it's not worth it.
Yeah. If it were to be remade, I would like to see a director like Scott Cooper or Jim Mickle, or, guys that do really good gritty movies.
Yeah.
Do it and give it some realistic elements, because Michael Mann, he's obviously a brilliant filmmaker, but that was just too shiny.
It was.
This was not a shiny lifestyle. And I guess in a way it was in that period with the flashy cars and the suits and everything. But ultimately they're hiding.
Right.
And
right.
As glamorous as you try to make your lifestyle, you're still hiding, and sometimes you're hiding in trees and ditches, and
you're burying your buddy in a field.
You're burying your buddy in a field, exactly.
And pouring lye on his face so they can't identify him, which they didn't do in this movie, but Dillinger did.
Right. Right.
It's gritty. It is.
Yeah.
You're right, and I think you're right. There was a certain shininess about most of Mann's thing. I mean, I know that I probably have said, and I don't know if we've done very many road movies here, but I know we've talked about road movies before, and there's a certain amount of connective tissue that needs to be done. I mean, hell, I was just talking about, hey, I'd like to see Dillinger's journey from Tucson or wherever to Keokuk, Iowa. I want to see that road trip.
Yeah.
But I think like in Michael Mann's version, in some ways there might have been a little bit too much connective tissue there. Mm-hmm. And so it made it feel a lot slower. This I felt was very well paced as a movie.
Oh yeah.
My whole thing is, if you're going to deviate so far from the real story when the facts are actually more cinematic, why even put Dillinger's name on it? Just make it somebody else.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it was the time.
Yeah.
It's a rip from a headlines type quality.
Yeah.
So I can understand that.
Yeah. Why not just make it based on true events?
Yeah, right. Well, what's the one where you go, oh, like inspired by true events?
Right.
That means sometimes somebody picked up a gun and pointed at somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's like a movie about that.
Very loosely based on true events.
Right. Right.
There were guns and shootouts and bank robberies.
A bullet was present when this happened. So we're making a gangster movie out of it.
Yeah.
And now, intermission. Refreshment time.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Hey, this is Ryan, host of the All Night Drive-In Picture Show.
Oh, you're the host now. Cool. Okay.
We have a new sponsor. We don't know much about this sponsor. All we know is we received a hefty envelope of cash and a script.
Did you say cash?
In 1978, Salvatore Uncle Fussy Giancomo opened his first Uncle Fussy's Family Hardware store in Newark, New Jersey. He served the greater Newark area with his large selection of hardware tools and gardening equipment, as well as providing neighborhood protection.
Neighborhood protection?
Today, Uncle Fussy has come into a little money, and it says not to ask, and is going national, and now there's an Uncle Fussy's Family Hardware in your neighborhood.
Okay, a couple things. I'm still hung up on the neighborhood protection thing, and I'm also wondering, do I not ask you, or am I not supposed to call Uncle Fussy, or...
Come in for our spectacular bargains on all your hardware needs. We have our own brand of pickaxes, perfect for breaking ground in any weather. Shovels that are ideal for digging shallow holes or starting a garden.
Shallow, like graves? Are we talking about graves here?
I don't want to assume. Rope for all varieties of usage, but great for binding. And this weekend only, we have a flash sale on Uncle Fussy's duct tape for only $2.99 a roll.
I think that goes back to the binding thing. Can we talk about this just a second before we keep going?
No. Industrial quality oil drums, just $49.99 each.
Okay, who the hell needs an oil drum?
Buy one, get one tarps.
Oh my God.
And a free 10-pound bag of lye with every purchase of over $50.
Okay, can you put this together here?
Look, I have specific instructions to read all of this script, and I'm starting to think it's a bad idea to deviate from that.
Okay. All right.
Come to our grand opening of Uncle Fussy's in Sandusky this Saturday. There will be free popcorn for the kids, a mobile petting zoo, and a classic car show featuring Lincoln Town cars from the 70s and 80s.
Okay, that's really specific.
And that's sponsored by Gotti's Sausage and Meatballs on 7th.
Hang on a second. Did you say Gotti?
Hey, here. It says Earl Gotti, no relation, right here on the script. Uncle Fussy's Family Hardware, doing favors since 1978.
Oh my God. We're we're going to get arrested.
One minute until showtime.
Coming soon to this drive-in theater.
On December 25th, 1953, a child is born, a virgin birth. Tomorrow, all civilization will tremble under his almighty power. He must be obeyed.
Who were Moses and Jesus really? Accept me, no questions. Sacrifices to your God are nothing new.
Are you going to tell me all those people are meant to die?
Why did you attack all those people?
God told me to.
God told me to.
It's showtime.
And now, please enjoy our feature presentation.
Three directors, 2 editors, multiple scenes of animal cruelty, a mute star, and a legendary producer who never lost a dime. Losing a whole bunch of dimes. This is Cockfighter.
What you are about to see is illegal in 47 states.
The black chicken.
I'll take 25 to 30.
I'll take it.
You're on. I'll lay 25 to 30. 25 30 on the red.
I'll lay 30 to 20.
25 30 there. Anybody got it?
Oh, you got it. 50 to 30. On the black. I got the black wrist.
You want to know something, boy? I am the finest trainer and conditioner in the whole world.
All right, let's go.
Cockfighting, the dirtiest sport in the world.
Get ready. Be it.
Now watch your face. No pity, no love, nothing.
Frank Mansfield, professional with a passion for violence.
I want to get married and have children.
The drive-in it is to be the best. I like to call it sharpness.
Not since the hustler has the violent underbelly of the gambling world been so nakedly exposed. What kind of a man risks everything in America's most controversial blood sport? The kind who will do anything to win.
It's the desire to win. Winning is the name of the game.
Warren Oates. Cockfighter. Rated R.
The movie begins with narration from its star, the late great Warren Oates. He plays Frank Mansfield, a down-on-his-luck owner of Fighting Roosters, a barely legal and inhumane form of gambling. Frank has taken a vow of silence after his boisterous braggart ways led him to losing nearly everything he has. He won't speak again until his Roosters won him the Cockfighter of the Year medal. He has had many interests in his life, but none of them match up to cockfighting.
I learned to fly a plane and lost interest in it. Water skiing, I lost interest in it. But this is something you don't conquer. Anything that can fight to the death and not utter a sound, well, the person that puts the most and works the hardest is supposed to win. And usually that's the way it comes out. The drive in it is to be the best. We call it sharpness. When you can hit that peak, when that bird is at his best, then he'll win for you. Because you make your luck. I can pick out the best bird by his conformation, his bone structure, but I can't look into his heart and tell you how game he is.
Can you picture Warren Oates being interested in water skiing. I tried, I forget the other thing he tried.
Flying planes. That makes more sense.
Flying planes, perfect.
Yeah.
He's a drug runner or he does whatever.
Yeah.
But tried water skiing, didn't take to it.
I'd imagine him on water skis wearing like cut off shorts and a cowboy hat.
See, that's what I was like, he would be like Fonzie, right? Jumping the shark, but he'd be wearing like a cowboy hat and like flowery shorts and spurs.
Right.
When he said water skiing, I was just like, what the hell? What is your problem?
You expect him to say something, like guns or,
skeet
shooting or whatever.
I tried being a mercenary and it just didn't take.
Yeah.
The thing that he feels like he just has to conquer and just can't do it is cockfighting.
Yeah.
That's he says he's amazed at anything that's willing to fight to the death without uttering a sound. Like, that's your thing, right?
Yeah.
Not defying gravity by flying a plane.
Yeah.
You conquered that. Water skiing, it's a cruel mistress. But cockfighting, that's the final frontier for this guy.
Those damn roosters. They're going to be the death of me.
Yeah.
Frank is traveling to the next fight with his girlfriend Dodie, played by the late Laurie Bird.
She says, I know that you can talk because you were saying in your sleep last night, Randy, your mother, I'm going to kick the shit out of you or whatever.
Yeah.
Who's Randy? And he just kind of gives her a look, but she's like, I want you to know that I know you can talk. I think she sees Frank for what he is.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about as we go on.
Frank wagers a lofty bet for the next fight with Jack Burke, played by the incomparable Harry Dean Stanton. Frank puts up his car and trailer against $1,000 of Burke's money.
Now, Stanton, amazing.
Yep.
And from what I understand, he always looked up to Warren Oates. So he was always trying to kind of be Warren Oates.
Yeah.
He always thought Oates got the better parts. He's like, why can't I be Frank Mansfield?
Yeah.
But I think that kind of shows through in this movie really well in a way that's really compelling and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about the scene where they make the bet, okay, stick with me here.
Sure.
I like the shot of Burke's crotch here. Now, hold on.
Okay. All right.
In the novel, this scene takes place really early in the morning. This is the very first scene in the whole book. Or actually, it's probably the second scene. I think the first scene is where he's trying to cut the beak. But the idea in the scene, the narration is, of course, from Frank's head in the book. And he's saying that he doesn't want to stand up at this moment because he's a little bit taller than Burke and he doesn't want to intimidate him. Because in the book, Burke's like an old guy with like long, kind of stringy, flaccid blonde hair, and he dresses like he does in the book.
Yeah.
And in fact, Frank says in the book, and it's really funny, he says he wears black and white shoes, two-tone shoes. And that's a sign of weakness. That's a sign of a man who can't make up his mind. But
Okay.
in the book, he talks about the whole thing where he doesn't want to stand up to intimidate him. So he wants Burke to feel this false sense of security that he has the upper hand making this bet because Frank thinks he's got a winning strategy here.
Yeah.
And I like the way Hellman just stayed on that shot. You have like a 3/4 profile of Oates and just Harry Dean's belt buckle, pretty much. His thumbs in his waistband or whatever.
Right.
I like that shot a lot because it evoked all that stuff without having the voiceover come in and say, well, I didn't want to stand up because I didn't want to intimidate him. And a lot of filmmakers would have done that.
Yeah.
Roger Corman probably would have done that if he had directed this movie, which he was supposed to, but then he decided not to.
It's funny you said that about Harry Dean wanting Warren Oates' parts because I can't see Harry playing the Frank character in this one.
Right.
Because that character's more hardened than Jack Burke. Burke's got the lucky streak, He's made a good amount of money off of cockfighting. And it's, Warren Oates' character, he's hardened, he's bitter.
He's heavier.
Yeah. And he's got that steely glaze in his eyes, whereas Harry Dean's got that kind of droopy face.
Yeah.
And he looks more vulnerable more often than not than he looks hard.
If you look at Warren Oates, he looks like a guy who always thinks he'll win, but is kind of resigned to losing.
Yeah.
And I don't think at this point in his career, I don't think Harry Dean quite had that going for him.
It wasn't until later on in his career that I really saw him as a good hardened character or a villain, if you would, in the TV show Big Love.
Right.
He was evil in that show.
Right.
But he also looked frail, because he was in his 80s at that point, and his character had a way of bending his will to other people to do his dirty work for him. That kind of character made sense with him later on down the line. But at this point, when he was still a younger man, I don't think that would have worked. Not as well, anyway.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm
taking nothing away from him because he was a brilliant actor.
Oh, no, and I think he plays Burke perfectly in this movie.
Yeah,
mean, it's perfect. People say that Oates was trying to be a movie star and never broke through, and I think that's just criminal, really, in the end.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is a certain kind of part for Warren Oates.
I mean, most mainstream audiences would know him as Sergeant Hulka from Stripes.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest role of his career, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, in the 80s, that and Blue Thunder, but Blue Thunder has been kind of forgotten now.
Right. Stripes is still
it's still kind of a mainstay in comedies. And, I like Stripes, but for Warren Oates, that's unfortunate. I mean, because he was so much more than that part.
And let's face it, Stripes fell apart after the training was over with.
Yeah,
and
it kind of
that's where Warren Oates disappears from the movie too. So I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but anyway, we're talking about Cockfighter and not Stripes.
Well, the other thing I was going to say here too is that, because we were talking about voiceover.
Right.
So according to Monty Hellman, the voiceover was pieced together from interviews that he and another screenwriter, Earl MacRausch, did with real cockfighters, and they kind of pieced it together.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true entirely, because I've read the book and there is a lot of narration in this book, especially when Frank parts ways with Doty here in a little bit. That's almost word for word from the book. And Willeford, Charles Willeford, who we'll actually see in the movie, wrote the screenplay. He also wrote the novel that the screenplay was based on. So I don't know why Hellman says that. Maybe it's just a memory thing. But the voiceover is, I would say that it's probably at least 70-30 in favor of the book.
Later, Frank takes a razor and carves a groove into the beak of his prizefighter Sandspur. The idea is to give the impression that the bird's beak is cracked and hopefully increase his chance of getting longer betting odds, and thus more money should he win. In voiceover, Frank claims to not be too proud of what he's doing, even though it's not technically against the rules. At the weigh-in, Sandspur is weighing a tad heavy, so Frank shaves off some of the feathers on its hindquarters. Sandspur qualifies. The audience of backwoods miscreants make their wagers at the sight of the competitors. Frank and Burke's handlers bring their birds together and manipulate them into biting at each other. The referee, Ed Middleton, played by the credited screenwriter and author of the original novel Charles Willeford, begins the bout. The birds bite, claw, and crash against each other. Burke's bird dominates Sandspur, landing a barb into its neck, killing it. Frank looks heartbroken as Burke's bird is declared the winner. On closer inspection, Sandspur's beak was also broken in the fight as Frank dug the groove too deep. Frank removes the barbs from the bird's legs and tosses it into a truck bed with other defeated birds. He's told by a bookie that he should give up cockfighting. Frank shoots him a confused look as if to say, "But this is what I do."
This is probably as good a place as any to talk about the reality of cockfighting in this time period.
Okay.
In the book, the action's set in Florida, because the book was written in 1962. By the mid-70s, I think cockfighting had been outlawed in Florida, so they moved it to Georgia, because the two states that I've read about that actually still had cockfighting as being legal were Georgia and Arizona. I think there might have been one other state, though, that had legal cockfighting, because one of the ad campaigns was he walked into town with his cock in his hand, and what he did next was illegal in 47 states. That was awesome. That was like when they couldn't really get the movie to fly, pun kind of intended. They'd use that. Outside of the main speaking roles, the people that you're seeing are actual cockfighters and actual participants and bettors and stuff. They weren't necessarily betting on the fights in the movie, but they were real. And they, I guess from what Hellman said, they would shoot with 4 or 5 cameras on every fight. So like, for instance, in this scene when they showed the little kid and he's like putting the dollar bill over his eyes, that kind of looks like something that an art director would do. In reality, it was just an accident. The kid just did it, and they just happened to catch it. In a way, you can kind of tell, because that seemed very natural, whereas much later on, you see a guy eating a chicken leg as he's watching the cockfights. That was staged. That was a Corman thing that he wanted in there later on. And you can kind of tell that that's a staged thing, you know. Yeah. I love Roger Corman. I'm so glad he didn't direct this movie. It's like beyond. But a lot of the fights were shot in Georgia. Some of the stuff at the end was shot in Arizona in the last fight with the sand floor. And, sometimes you see in the last fight, you'll see the roosters going at each other with blue sky. I think that was shot in Arizona. And that wasn't shot by Hellman. That was shot by the editor, Louis Teague. And the reason for that was that Hellman didn't like cockfighting. He was repulsed by it. It made him sick. And he actually was more interested in the subculture of cockfighting than he was in the actual fights themselves. His intention was to make a movie that repulsed you when you watched it, and, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And Corman actually was pissed off about that Hellman backed off from the fights in the original cut because he wanted blood and guts. Even though, as Hellman said, in reality, in a cockfight, you don't have really blood splattering all over the place. Like, they don't really, I guess, bleed that much, the roosters, when they're stuck with the spurs. But Corman tells a story in his autobiography or his memoir, about being in this cockfighting space, and these cockfights are going on and everything when they're doing like location scouts and research and stuff. So Corman looks around and he's kind of like, where's Monty at? He can't find Hellman, and he ends up finding him in the parking lot. And then in his memoir, Corman said that he thought to himself, great, I have a director who is sickened by cockfighting shooting a cockfighting picture like this. This could be bad. So what basically ends up happening, this is where the three directors come in. Somebody shot some of the gorier stuff that you see in these early fights in Georgia. A second unit director did, but nobody seems to remember that person's name. So no idea who that was. Hellman said he didn't shoot a lot of the gore that you'll see that was put in later. Louis Teague, who is the credited editor on the movie, shot the gorier stuff, especially towards the end. Even though there's a little controversy about that, in Brad Stevens' book about Monty Hellman, Hellman seems to say that Louis Teague shot that stuff. In the DVD commentary, he says something a little bit different. He says he doesn't remember what Teague shot or if he shot anything at all. So I'm going to go with the print book because it's in print, and I kind of feel like that's a little bit different. There's a fact-checking process there.
Sure.
So Teague shot the stuff in Arizona, and Teague was responsible for editing all the cockfighting scenes together. And then Hellman was supervising Teague's work on that, but then also responsible for editing all the dramatic stuff together. So the cockfighting thing is a little bit complicated in this movie, and it's kind of amazing to me that it actually all works together in the end at all.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that in the DVD commentary, Hellman says that they had to stage fights so they could control the outcome. And in the commentary for this scene, he says that they used rubber spurs on the birds, and that there's a way you can hold a rooster upside down so that it looks like it's dead, but it's really not.
I don't buy that.
Well, I bought it when he said it.
I mean, it's possible, I guess.
Right. But later on, he kind of switches that up a little bit, and we can talk about it when we get there. Because the way that they ended up rigging these things made me sick.
Yeah, this is definitely not a film for animal lovers because it's very real, unfortunately.
And you're going to be shocked who was around to witness some of it.
Okay.
I'll tell you that.
Okay.
I don't want to be like, ooh, but you don't want to blow your wad too soon.
Sure, yeah.
We learned that from Roger Corman. Oh, wait a minute.
Frank angrily signs over the car and trailer to Burke. Dodie protests, wondering how Burke could take away someone's home like that. A bet's a bet. Dodie says she never shook on this deal. Frank basically hands her off to Burke so that she has a place to stay and packs up what he has left, a suitcase and an empty cage, and he leaves. She pleads with Frank not to leave her, but he ignores her.
I felt sorry for her in a way, but I didn't worry about her. She was pretty and young, a good lay. Hell, she'd get by anywhere. Piss on her and the horse she rode in on.
In the book, he kind of talks about how he met her, and basically he'd only known her for like 3 weeks or something. And he had picked her up in some town where he had stopped by to fight his cock.
Jokes write themselves. They really do.
It's going to be a very long episode.
Yeah. It's obvious that he doesn't give a shit about her, as we find out later on in the movie, too.
I also think there's a part of it where, because he throws the wash at her when he's packing up, because those are his shirts and he can't pack them in a suitcase because he'll get everything all wet. So he's kind of pissed off about her not doing the washing, which is, antique.
Yeah. Along with everything else in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it didn't age well. I think her whole thing from the beginning still kind of rings back in my head. I think he's a little, I wouldn't say intimidated by her, but I think he's annoyed by the fact that she kind of can see through his bullshit a little bit.
Yeah.
With her talking about hearing him talk in his sleep and everything. And I think there might be a little bit of that in there too. Not a lot. I think he's just a bastard and obsessed with fighting cocks. Sorry.
I purposefully tried to avoid the cock jokes in this
but rooster
coverage,
rooster jokes are so good though, man.
They are.
And let's just get this out of the way,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
We'll talk about this in a little bit. The vow of silence is just bullshit.
Yeah.
It's an interesting exercise for an actor, and I think Oates does it better than pretty much anybody I could think of. But, I mean, that's a maturity level that's well below teenager.
Oh, sure.
Was
that in the book, too?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
I was wondering if it was just a way to be able to use narration.
No, it was in the book that way. And it was the same basic setup. I mean, he had lost everything, and so he took on this vow of silence until he could win the championship.
Frank catches a ride with Ed Middleton, who chastises him for cutting the groove in the beak too deep. Ed brandishes a Cockfighter of the Year medal and says it could have been Frank's years ago if he hadn't shot his mouth off. This leads us into a flashback. A loudmouth bragging Frank taunts Burke into an impromptu cockfight in a hotel room and ends up losing his prize gamecock, and any shot that he has at a Cockfighter of the Year medal for that season.
I got the finest 5-pound chicken alive, Jack. Right here in my hands, the very finest. You want to know something, boy? I am the finest trainer and conditioner in the whole world. And my bird here, he can beat anything you got to show, man. Anything. Anything.
Yeah, listen, I'm getting tired of listening to you brag, Frank. God damn it. Why don't you put some money where your mouth is right now?
Come on, Frank's just talking. Jack, it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, wait a minute. He's been doing all the goddamn bragging. Let's see a little action now, all right?
Tomorrow, who's got the best?
No, we're going to find out right now, okay?
200.
Yeah.
Flat out, no odds.
200? 200 even, okay? Give your money to Lucille.
Here, Lucille, keep the change sweet.
After the loss, Frank puts on his sunglasses and exits into the darkness as he vows in voiceover not to speak until he wins the medal.
That shot, man, when he walks out into the darkness is pure magic.
Yeah.
And then it goes into him waking up in Ed Middleton's place. So it's kind of a flashback, kind of a dream. It's just so beautiful.
For everything that's truly offensive about this movie, it looks really good.
It did. The cinematographer, Nestor Almendros, is just brilliant. I mean, some of the stuff that we'll see in the home sequence was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And I guess that he had a problem with his eyes. So they could only work a certain amount of time every day. They shot this movie in 23 days, right?
Yeah.
This guy had a problem with his eyes, but he would still work 16 hours a day. But what he would do is they would shoot for 8 hours or whatever, or 10 hours. And then he would spend the rest of the time lighting everything for the next day so that they could come in with their 5 cameras or whatever and just shoot anything they wanted and it would all be lit. So that's why the movie, I think, looks so consistent and why it also looks so good, because this guy, even though he had this eye condition, still really prepped everything. Okay, so the beautiful stuff in this scene is out of the way. And the cockfighting, the slow motion stuff is really graceful and horrifying in its own right.
Yeah.
But Hellman admitted in the DVD commentary that this fight was real.
Yeah.
And that the dead rooster died. His rationale for it, he said that he was embarrassed to admit that it was true, but his rationale for it was that they would be in the pit fighting the next day anyway. So it was just kind of accelerating the inevitable.
Well, how did they know that Frank's bird was going to lose for real?
That's probably the most horrifying part. When they shot real stuff, they would give the losing bird rubber spurs and the winning bird steel spurs.
Oh, God. That's awful.
So it's just really brutal. I think Hellman really was upset about it. Like, hearing him talk about it, he was just kind of like...
I would be repulsed with myself for doing something like that.
Yeah, I know.
For being part of it.
So on that bright note...
The next morning, Ed wakes Frank, and they go check out the gamecocks that Ed owns. Ed's wife made him give up fighting, but he still sells roosters on the side. Frank finds a bird named White Lightning that he thinks would be a heavy hitter. Ed offers it to Frank for $500, but Frank doesn't have that kind of scratch. Ed says the offer's on the table when he's ready. Frank takes a bus back to his hometown and walks to a home that we discover he owns. His brother Randall, played by Troy Donahue, and sister-in-law Frances, played by Millie Perkins, live there. Randall doesn't seem pleased to see him because he owes Frank money that he doesn't have, but they take Frank in anyway. Later, a woman named Mary Elizabeth, played by Patricia Piercy, stops by and she and Frank passionately kiss. She's with her mother, who stays in the car. Frank runs over and jumps up and down on her car like a gorilla. He tries to kiss Mary again, but she backs him off, saying he's been gone for 6 months and she's moved on to a man named Joe Lee who wants to marry her. That doesn't stop her from almost doing the double-back beast with Frank down by the river. But before they get going, she admits to loving him, but she's not going to wait for him. It's either cockfighting or her. He walks away, and he's a damn fool for doing it. In the next scene, we see Frank visiting a real estate office. Cut to Frank leading a series of flatbed trucks and heavy machinery to the side of his house. Frank has sold the property and is having the house moved away.
It's interesting that when he goes home, you see him walking to the house, and Mansfield's on the water tower.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, did these people once run this little town and now they're just kind of like down and out? Because his farm that we'll go to here in a little while, Mansfield Farm, isn't even in this town. It's in, I think it's in Decatur, Georgia or someplace like that.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre, that whole dynamic that they never really talk about. But you do kind of get that sense, though, from his brother, from Randall, because the scene where he's sitting there and he gets his coffee, but then he also has that shot of whiskey or whatever sitting on the table. Donahue played that perfectly.
Yeah, he did.
I love how kind of subtly weird the whole home sequence is.
Yeah.
Everything else is very utilitarian in this movie for the most part. I mean, you have the flashback, but it's still utilitarian. It's kind of portrayed as a dream in a way.
Yeah.
But the home sequence, the editing is different in it. It's shot just a little bit differently, especially between Mary Elizabeth and Frank. It's beautifully shot. And the porch scene, actually, that was something that was contributed by Hellman. Like, that wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
That, and I think the scene down by the river, too, was also a contribution. That was something that Corman took out in subsequent cuts, but Hellman was really proud of that scene, which I think he should be. I mean, it's a really interesting scene. It actually reminds me of the scene between Lynn and Walker in Point Blank. Sharon Acker plays Lynn and Lee Marvin plays Walker in Point Blank. And she's talking to him, and he's not a mute in that movie, but he doesn't speak a lot.
Right.
So the scene's all her. She's having to carry the whole thing. And I think here, Patricia Piercy carries this scene even better than Sharon Acker did in Point Blank. I mean, she carries the scene so well. And Oates does a great job of cueing her and talking back without saying anything. But she's so good. In fact, she's so good that when we get to the end of it, I think to myself, I thought he took a vow of silence. Because I think he talks in the scene and he doesn't say a word.
Right.
She's so brilliant. The other thing that I think is fascinating about this sequence is the editing, because the crossfades between him going down at the end of the scene on the porch, they go down and she says to her mother, who's in the car honking the horn, family life trying to intrude on Frank's like carnal desires with this woman. He just wants to have a fling down by the water and then get the hell out of town with the money that his brother owes him, right?
Right.
But instead, Mama's honking the horn the whole damn scene. I mean, you start from when they're inside, sucking face until he finally goes down with her and she says, "This is Frank, Mama. Remember him? You always liked him." That crossfade from there to the lakeside sequence is really slow. Yeah. So slow that you have the images kind of one image superimposed on the other one. And that kind of crossfade happens again when you come out of the lakeside scene and go into him going to the real estate office to sell the property. To me, I think that those edits kind of tell you Frank's thought process, that he's kind of having to go over and go along to get along with Mama because he wants to make it with Mary Elizabeth down by the water, right? And then he's down by the water with her, and just before they can get to doing the deed, she refuses him and gives him an ultimatum that he can't satisfy, so he gets up and walks away, and she's still there, and that crossfade's really slow, which makes me think that's why then he says, if you're going to do that to me, fine, I'm going to go and I'm going to sell this property, the only tie I have left beside you to this place.
Yeah.
Not only does he sell it, but then they move the house. Like he literally puts his homestead that he owns, this other homestead that he owns, on the highway. I mean, it's like...
He takes himself
Exactly.
Literally out of the town.
Exactly.
And every trace of him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it sounds heavy-handed as I'm sitting here talking about it because I'm not doing it justice. But in the movie, it's so subtle.
Yeah.
That it makes sense, and you feel that it's different from the rest of the movie, like this little sequence, the way it's edited, the way it's put together. It's kind of almost like dream logic in a way. Things just kind of happen. Whereas throughout the rest of the movie, things kind of happen in a logical order. You know, you weigh, you fight, you do this, you do that. But it's so great.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like my favorite little sequence in the movie, I think, just because it's just so brilliant.
I also like how Randall doesn't seem totally surprised at all that they're going to move the house.
Yeah.
I guess we're moving.
Yeah.
And so's the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just doesn't seem... It seems like something his brother would do. You know?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I like Troy Donahue in that part. I mean, he was like a matinee idol in the early
Yeah.
60s, then his star kind of faded.
I was going to say, I was wondering if he was an adopted brother.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause Warren Oates is not really a looker. You know?
No. And Millie Perkins as Frances, his wife, she's so great, and she's criminally underused.
Judging by her IMDb profile, too, she'd been around for a long time at that point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you should see The Shooting, Hellman's Western.
Yeah.
It's like an existential Western. And she's fantastic in that. She's the antagonist in it, and she's just hard-nosed in that movie.
Really?
She's just so great. She's not really used very much in this movie. The only other part I think that probably would have been good for her in this movie would be the Mary Elizabeth part. But Patricia Piercy's so damn good in that part that what do you do?
Right.
Unfortunately, there are only so many parts for women to go around in this movie.
Right.
So a lot of cocks, you know. There aren't even a lot of female chickens in this movie.
No, not a lot of hens in this one. Yeah.
yeah, female chickens. Hey, this is a guy who hasn't spent any time in the barnyard.
Silly boy. Back at Ed's, Frank lays $500 on the table. Ed says he can't take his money, which is hilarious to me. It's like, dude, you know, you make the guy sell his home and property and everything.
He goes home, yeah.
Yeah, and then you come back and say, you can have the bird.
You can just have the bird.
Screw you,
I
man.
just want to make sure you were serious.
But of course, you know, I'm sure that this doesn't bother Frank at all because that's more money in his pocket. So, you know,
yeah, well,
but still.
Here's the thing, though, too. I felt that way when I saw this scene.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that I swallowed it all right was because Charles Willeford is so damn good as Ed Middleton.
Yeah.
He's like one of the best parts of this movie as far as like actors go.
Right.
I think after Oates and Stanton, I think Willeford's right there. And you know that they had a guy cast for this part, but right before they started shooting, Hellman was like, I don't think I can get out of that actor what I'm going to need from him. And so he fired him, and he decided to read Willeford for it just because Willeford was around all the time.
Right.
And he gave him the part. He's great. I would never really know that he's not an actor if I didn't know who he was.
Right. So Ed says he can't take his money. He's sick of raising birds and offers it to Frank at no cost. He also tells him he can get him a deal on a dozen other Gamecocks.
The thing that's interesting here, though, too, is, again, the family life thing comes in. I mean, like, they are hitting this theme really hard because Ed's wife says, why don't you let Frank get done with his breakfast? You're rushing him off, and he's just kind of like, I'm not rushing him. And they look like these two little kids that are waiting to go out and play on summer break, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see this clashing between maturity and immaturity.
Right.
Having manners, having decorum, and having rules about you got to get your nourishment, you got to do this, you got to do that. But it's like, but I'm not, I want to, you know.
Ma.
Yeah, but Ma. So I think that that's interesting. And I think that the thing that I find fascinating in Hellman's direction of the scene is that he spends a lot of time hanging on the wife in the scene a little bit as she's reacting to some of the stuff that they're saying. Again, it's subtle, but it's kind of saying, hey, there's this other world that these guys are missing out on because they're so obsessed with making birds fight with each other.
I would think that any spouse in this situation would not want their spouse. In this case, this is primarily men that are involved in it.
Right.
So any wife would not want their husband involved in something like that, something that's already banned in the majority of the United States.
Yeah.
In this case, almost all of the United States. It's something that will inevitably get banned. And it's betting, it's gambling. It's not like it's a real job, you know?
Yeah. The thing that I found interesting, and I think Hellman might have said something about this in the commentary, At some point he said, we kind of figured that we would get there and it would be good old boys, backwoods types and all this stuff.
Yeah.
He said in reality, it was really kind of a middle-class sport down there. It was one of those things where it was viewed as something that was done for generations, and it was something that was viewed as a legitimate way among them of making money. So I don't, I don't know. I mean, I think it would kind of be one of those things like if a husband is obsessed with restoring cars or whatever, or the whole cliche of the golf widow. I kind of get the impression that it's that, but I think that Hillman does emphasize it a little bit more here than you would get if you had the equivalent of, with a golf widow or whatever in some other movie. It feels like there's something a little bit more profound here. And I think that could be his disgust with the sport, kind of projecting that onto these characters. So that may or may not have been there in real life, but it is there. And it's definitely noticeable if you're looking for it.
Frank buys an old beater truck and travels back to his farm, where his right-hand man, Buford, played by Robert Earl Jones, tells him that the man he's buying birds from, Omar, played by Richard B. Schull, helped to bring some of the birds in from the express depot last night. Soon Omar arrives and Frank silently lets him know that he doesn't like what he sees in the birds. He teases one of the roosters into attacking his leg, but he isn't impressed. Out of anger, he takes the bird to a stump and cuts its head off.
For real.
Ugh.
I mean, for real.
You can tell it's real too when you look at it. I mean, surely they didn't have some robotic bird that was...
No, they didn't have a budget for fake birds.
No.
Yeah.
That was disgusting. By the way, before we go any further into this, Richard B. Schull looks just like Walter Matthau.
He does look a lot like Matthau.
Oh, my God. They could be brothers.
Oh, and I forgot, too, before we go on, Robert Earl Jones, father of James Earl Jones.
That's his father?
That is his father.
Whoa.
Yeah.
No kidding.
I think he was born in like 1914 or 1990. I mean, he was something like 60 years old almost.
I wouldn't have guessed him to be that old in this movie.
I would have guessed that he was James Earl Jones' brother.
James Earl Jones looks like he hasn't aged in the last 40 years too. So,
yeah, it's true.
Good genes in that family.
No kidding.
Omar smooths things over and wants to partner up with Frank. He's got the money and the birds. Frank accepts the offer. Omar has a large farm with multiple hen houses. Frank and Omar train the birds, feed them, and inject them with vitamins. At the next fight, Frank's bird is dominating another bird. After a couple of rounds, Frank's bird and the other bird, which is wounded and rather listless, square up, but Frank's bird casually struts out of the ring. This is a disqualification. Omar protests, but the judgment stands, and he pays up as an embarrassed Frank ushers the bird out of the building. Afterward, he's approached by a guy named Junior, played by Steve Railsback, who most people know as Charles Manson from the Helter Skelter movie.
So he's so creepy in this movie.
He really is, especially his next action.
The rooster walking out of the ring, the rooster was supposed to do that, but they didn't know how the hell they were going to get the rooster to do it, and so the rooster just did it. He just got bored and walked out on his own.
It looked like it.
Yeah. And
it looks so funny, too, the way he just kind of walked out like,
he's just like,
I'm done.
Oh, this is bullshit.
I whipped this dude's ass. I'm done.
Hellman said, he's like, I think these roosters like read the script. They always did exactly what we wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And we didn't have trainers.
Yeah.
So they just kind of did what we needed them to do. So crazy. Because I thought that they had somebody out there doing something to get that rooster to walk off the way he did. But he's like, no, he just did it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So he's approached by Railsback, who has a bird that's won 2 fights, or so he's heard from a guy who sold him the rooster. He challenges Frank to a match and bets $25. Frank surveys the bird and agrees. The fight begins, and after 1 round, Junior picks up the bird and shoves his finger up its ass, trying to antagonize it. The judge disqualifies him immediately. I really hope he didn't do that for real.
I think he did.
Oh, God. At one point, I noticed that he flings his finger back and something flies off of his finger.
Yeah.
I don't want it. Junior argues that his deity said it was a legal move, but the judge says it's illegal and blacklists him from all future tournaments. Junior begins to leave without paying Frank. Frank confronts him, and Junior says he was so confident he would win that he didn't bring any cash. Frank chicken wings him, no pun intended, and Omar grabs his wallet and takes his payment.
How much do you have to pay an actor to do what he did? Like blowing up that chicken's ass?
He didn't just stick his finger up his ass. He finger banged that poor chicken, you know?
And, in this movie, multiple actors put their mouth over the chicken's head and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess that's an effort to wake them up. They pour water on their head just like you do with a boxer. But the other thing I thought was interesting in this scene was, when they're still in the ring and Railsback is protesting and Warren Oates pushes him back.
Yeah.
I guess that wasn't in the script, but the reason Oates did that was because even in the scene, he had the presence of mind to know that where Railsback was veering wasn't covered by a camera. It was one of the few spots it wasn't covered by a camera. And Oates, always thinking, pushed him back into the frame. It was kind of directing on the fly, like blocking on the fly, keeping him in the frame.
Wow.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
The other thing that I read about in Brad Stevens' book about Monty Hellman, but then didn't know about until I saw the commentary, was that this was the scene where Jimmy Carter was visiting.
What?
Governor Jimmy Carter was on the set, and Hellman said that every time they would move the camera, Carter would kind of move his seat so that he wasn't on camera. He kind of knew where things were. Apparently, he talked to Hellman and said that there had been cockfighters in his family for generations, and that he was kind of there because I think that animal rights activists like the SPCA and people like that were rightfully getting upset about the filming of this movie. And Carter came to placate them, I think. But I think he also just realized that it was still legal. The thing is that cockfighting is legal, but gambling's illegal.
Yeah.
And I don't know in Georgia if it was the same thing. So it was kind of like this gray area of legality. But it's shocking to me that a governor of a state you would never have that today.
No.
You would never have that. I mean, a governor can't even show up, or senator or politician can't even show up for a town hall.
I can just imagine how that went to. Now, Governor, this is Steve. Steve's going to stick his finger up this bird's ass.
Steve, how you doing, son? I'll just refrain from shaking your hand right now.
Yeah. Why'd you put that bird's head in your mouth like that?
I know why you did it. You probably should have done it this way.
Frank writes Mary Elizabeth a letter asking her to come see him fight his birds in the championship tournament.
Dear Mary Elizabeth, we have got to make a decision about what to do with our lives. Until you've been to a cockfight or seen me in the cockpit, we won't ever have any understanding. I'm sending you 2 tickets to the Milledgeville tournament for March the 15th and 16th. Oh, my love. Frank. P.S. You've got to give me a fighting chance.
At the next fight, Burke tells Frank that he married Dodie. Frank shakes his hand and doesn't seem to care. Burke and Frank bring their birds to the ring. After a couple of rounds, the match is cut short as the scorned Dodie hops in the ring and begins to swipe her purse at Frank. Burke carries her out of the ring as Frank teases her. Omar tells Frank that they are ahead on money and that they could skip the next town to gear up for the championship in Milledgeville. Frank wants to keep fighting. Meanwhile, there's a meeting about how the city is giving the promoter heat about the next fight night and doesn't want it in his town. As a way of skirting that issue, the promoter proposes that they have a fight in his hotel room and says the carpet would make a great ring and the dead cocks could go in the bathtub naturally. There are some big money bettors flying in from Nashville. Frank leads Omar out of the room and writes a note saying he's not sold on this idea. They could lose their birds in a potential raid. Omar tells Frank to take the Derby birds and go on to Cook's Hollow. In Cook's Hollow, Frank is approached by the Peoples, a father and son team played by Tom Spratley and Ed Begley Jr. It's kind of funny in retrospect that Ed Begley Jr. is in this movie, considering what a Hollywood lefty he is, with his environmental issues and all that.
I think this is probably only the second movie that Ed Begley Jr. was in.
Right.
So I think he's probably at an age here where he's just like, a job's a job.
Right. The Peoples challenge him to a private fight at their farm for big money. Frank accepts their challenge, but is tipped off by a friend that they are cheaters. He says they have a square of linoleum in their pit and rub rosin on their bird's feet. On that slick surface, the other bird doesn't have a chance. He gives Frank a chunk of rosin so his bird won't be at a disadvantage. Back at the hotel room, the fights have begun, and there's already a tub full of dead birds. Omar's taking a leak when he hears some masked armed robbers enter the room. Under one mask is an uncredited Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers. Omar hides his money under the dead birds and enters the room. The gunman makes the bettors take their pants off. They fold him up in a sheet and take off with their pants and presumably their money.
Dickie Betts' mask is funny, so he's got a cigarette hanging out of his The guy who's directing traffic in the robbery in the old man mask, that's Donnie Fritz from Chris Christopherson's band.
Oh, really?
He was Chris Christopherson's longtime keyboardist. The guy in the Nixon mask, he was a PA on this movie, and he was a friend of Hellman's, and he later wrote Hellman's movie Iguana. His name's Steve Gatos. He was actually wearing a suit that he borrowed from Nestor Almendros, the cinematographer, in there. Gatos is actually on the commentary I heard, and he said that he wished he could still fit into that suit, but it's not possible.
Yeah, when they came in, I was like, man, they're a couple of presidents away from being Point Break.
I know. I thought this scene was really funny, though, because I like the old man who like shows his tobacco pouch, and they're like, of course, a whole Southern thing, you can keep your tobacco, and then he tries to get the money, and they come back in, and you know. And how smart is Omar hiding his wad in the dead birds?
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the People's Farm, Frank rosins up his bird and enters the pit. He slides across the linoleum on his way in. White Lightning makes quick work of their bird, killing it. Begley, who plays the son Tom, is upset and attacks Frank. Frank knocks him out with a board. Mr. Peoples tries to stiff Frank on the payout, only giving him part of what he's owed. Frank takes the cash and wants 10 of his birds. Mr. Peoples protests as Frank climbs into his car. Tom comes screaming out of the barn with an axe and bashes out a window. Frank grabs the axe and pushes the door open, knocking Tom to the ground. Frank drags Tom to a horse trough and threatens to drown him. Ultimately, he lets him go and cuts his losses. I thought it was very funny in this scene, too, how Tom's dad is very casual about him almost drowning his son. It's like, oh, now he's not going to be able to breathe under there.
Why'd you hit him so hard, Mr.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that we're probably putting on more of a Southern accent than this guy actually had. Because he was like a New York actor,
right?
But it was his attitude that was so Southern that then in retrospect, you're like, oh, I heard that guy doing a Southern accent, like, why'd you hit him so hard, Mr. Frank or Mr. Mansfield?
Another thing that's funny about him, too, is that he doesn't look like a farmer. He's wearing like a suit and a
tweed jacket.
A fedora.
Smoking a pipe.
Right.
The other thing about this scene that I thought was really funny is how awkward and impotent the fight scene is between Frank and Tom. When they're fighting, it's just so gangly and awkward. Yeah. And it's interesting because these guys talk a big game and they have these birds in there fighting for them, but then when it comes down to them fighting, they just look like a couple of puppets with their strings cut off. You know? It does kind of say something about how impotent these guys are.
Yeah.
The other thing about the hotel robbery scene that I thought was really funny was when they made them all take off their pants, of course, Laurie Bird as Dodie is there, and she takes off her underwear. It's like, what?
So it's on to Milledgeville for the Cockfighter of the Year tournament, and it's on a plantation.
Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?
Of course. Frank is informed that there is someone waiting on him that's anxious to see him. He thinks it may be Mary Elizabeth, and he sprints to the big house. Turns out it's just Ed. He's the head referee.
Cock blocking Frank at a cockfighting tournament.
You son of a bitch. Later, Burke makes a $1,000 side bet with Frank on their upcoming match. Burke makes Dodie apologize to Frank for attacking him, and the plantation owner insults Omar's Polish heritage.
The scene that they're at is like this party, this night before party. And they're all walking around in their suits and tuxes and stuff with their numbers safety pinned to their backs. It's like if they were all going to run marathons, but in
It's like they take out a legend. Well, number 12, that's Jimmy,
It's so weird. And the owner is sitting there, the senator, I think it's a senator or something, is sitting there telling Omar.
This is Frank's partner, Senator, Mr. Beredinsky.
Oh, yes. Russian, aren't you, Mr. Beredinsky?
No, Polish.
You look Russian. Well, anyway, you're in good hands with Frank Mansfield. I knew Frank's granddaddy. And if you listen to Frank, Mr. Beredinsky, you'll learn a lot about the game fowl business. Isn't that right, Ed?
Frank could teach us a lot of things if he wanted to say anything.
That's what I mean. General Severus, before he invaded Great Britain, made his Roman legion watch cockfights for 3 days. The example was enough.
Dinner, sir.
They don't feed game fowl right in Poland, Mr. Beredinsky. Gamecocks can't fight on raw potatoes.
I'll keep that in mind, sir.
4 generations in Evanston. He talks to me like I just got off the boat.
The tournament begins, and lo and behold, the Cockfighters are wearing suits because this is a civilized event.
That's right. That's right.
Frank wins his first fight by disqualification. And in between bouts, of course, Frank signs some autographs.
Of course he does, because he's a superstar.
That's right.
And he gets his picture taken, and they cut his head off in the picture, so he could be kind of anybody. In Brad Stevens' book about Hellman, he kind of theorizes that this has, in some way, kind of equates Frank with the roosters that he kills.
Yeah.
And I guess that would kind of make sense given what Mary Elizabeth says later on about comparing Frank to a rooster.
Mm-hmm.
It seems kind of weird. I don't know why it was included necessarily, but I thought it was kind of a neat touch, like actually showing the picture. And
I thought it was just so he wouldn't be implicated later on when this was eventually banned.
Maybe,
you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like that time that I asked Captain Hook to sign my autographed book at Disney World, and he signed it Jim.
That's great.
And my dad looked at I said, what does that say? And Dad looked at it, he says, well, son, I think he signed it Jim. And we turned around, he was gone. He was just like on down the fairway.
Good old Jim.
Yeah, good old Jim. Jim Hook.
It's time for Frank and Burke's bout. Frank has White Lightning.
White Lightning.
And Burke has Little David.
Little David.
White Lightning sinks a barb into Little David's neck, but Little David isn't done yet. In the second round, Lightning takes a barb and he's bloodied. Mary Elizabeth arrives to see Lightning rebound in the third round with another barb to the neck. Both birds fight to the death, but Frank is declared the winner. Mary Elizabeth is disgusted by the barbarism on display and leaves the pit area. Frank chases after her.
That's close enough. I don't want you to touch me, ever. I should have watched you in the ring long ago. You are not the man I fell in love with. Now I know you never were. I didn't watch those poor chickens fighting. I watched your face. No pity, no love, nothing. I think that bird has more of a heart than you ever will have. He sure as hell has more of a voice.
In a strange attempt to prove his love, he stomps on the deceased Lightning's head and rips it off, sticking it in Mary's hand. She takes out a handkerchief, wraps it up, and sticks it in her purse.
Thank you. This is your substitute for a heart. At least it'll serve to remind me what a damn fool I have been.
Omar excitedly runs in and exclaims,
Hey, Frank, did you hear the announcement? Senator Foxhall just awarded you Cockfighter of the Year. Come on, let's hustle. As your partner, I'm entitled to a little reflected glory.
Maybe you can sleep with your medal, Frank, and eat it all at the same time. Maybe it'll give you some comfort in your old age.
Everything all right between you and her?
She loves me, Omar.
Omar looks stunned that he is speaking. The two men run back up the hill to collect their medal as the movie ends.
That is a puzzling scene.
Yeah, it is.
At the end. In the book, he's just kind of like, I didn't need her and she never needed me. It was just wrong. And there's a whole nother character. There are like 3 big characters in the book that were cut out in the movie entirely.
Really?
One of them was this widow named Bernice that he has a relationship with. And there's also like this whole other thing about Frank's country music singing career. Yeah, I
Really?
forgot about that. So he tried water skiing,
Yeah.
piloting, country music.
Country music.
Cockfighting is a thing he couldn't solve. He can't quit cockfighting. But in the book, he just says, I'm going to take Bernice to Puerto Rico, and by the time I get back, it's going to be time to start gearing up for the next season, you know? Hellman changed that, and he thought that it was a very poetic line in the end for him to say, she loves me, Omar. The reason he said that was because in the book, you just kind of have this wrapped up thing, whereas in the movie, he kind of felt like he wanted something more open-ended so that you walk away saying, now what happens? Does he go back for her? Is she going to marry this Joe Lee guy? Like, you can walk out talking about possibilities.
Right.
The other thing about the She Loves Me Omar line is what it did to Roger Corman. Corman would leave film directors alone while they were shooting the film. He would tell them what he wanted, and he would typically come down right before the filming started to just kind of like boost everybody up and say, hey, let's go, rah, 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 and then go back.
Hi, I'm Roger Corman.
Hi, I'm Roger Corman, and we need to make a lot of money on this. So Corman comes down to Georgia, right? And Hellman gives him the shooting script, and he reads it, and he reads that last line, she loves me, Omar. Now, Hellman says that he thought it was because Corman's mind was very kind of scientific. He is a very scientific guy. So that's how he made money for so many years on films, because he was just very kind of down the line about it and by the numbers.
Yeah.
So he didn't like the idea of an open possibility at the end of this movie. It wasn't wrapped up tight. So he said that Corman's, at his hotel or whatever, he reads the script. He comes to the production office, walks in without saying a damn word, throws the script as hard as he can at the wall, and then walks out, gets in his car, drives to the airport, and goes back to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah, he was so pissed off about it. I thought that was really funny, even though Corman, I think, left the ending the way it was because he didn't have anything else. I thought the thing about pulling the rooster's head off and handing it to her,
yeah.
I don't think it was to prove his love to her, but I think it was kind of like a childish attempt to make her confront what kind of person he is.
Yeah.
Even though I think she always knew it, she just didn't want to admit it to herself. The thing about this scene, though, that is kind of horrifying and also kind of a stroke of dark genius was that when Patricia Piercy sees the cockfight, that was the first time she had seen one the entire shoot. Hellman made it so that when she came in and sat down, she was seeing a real cockfight for the first time. And so all that look that you get is genuine. The bird head that he puts into her hand was real, and that was the one and only take that they did of it because they didn't have another bird. And Hellman lamented the fact that he didn't have a camera the other way so that he could shoot her reaction shot. He just had that one shot of it. But all that stuff is real, so the disgust you're seeing from her is real, which, like I say, is intelligent to do as a filmmaker. Ethically, I don't know. I mean, that seems like a real Billy Friedkin thing to do to somebody.
It kind of does, and I feel like it wouldn't matter if it was her first one or she'd seen many. You can still be easily repulsed by what you're seeing,
right,
and portray that.
I think he probably did that because he in some way realized, well, hey, we don't have a lot of time, so we got to get this done, and we have to do it. As we were talking about earlier, this is the scene that I think Louis Teague probably shot the most of, from what I can kind of glean from what I've read and heard.
Yeah.
The blood splatter on Burke's black and white shoes is one of the things that Teague shot because Hellman said he definitely didn't shoot that. The reason that we see this movie the way it is today is because when cable came calling for this movie, they wanted Hellman's version of the movie. So any version of the movie you see that's called Cockfighter is Hellman's version of the movie. They put it out, it flopped big time, and even flopped in Georgia among cockfighting community, even though it was very realistic. They thought it was going to go over like gangbusters down there, and they were just like, nah, we don't care. Corman recalled it. Well, actually, you know what? I have Corman's book here. I love Corman's memoir, How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime. It should say, except on Cockfighter. Although he's probably made his money back by now.
Probably.
He gets Joe Dante, right? So this is what Dante says about it. I'm editing another picture when I get a call from Roger in Europe. Here's what we're going to do, he says. I want you to go into night call nurses, and I want you to take out the dynamite truck chase, and then go into private duty nurses and take out the bedroom scene. And I want you to cut all these things into a 1-minute montage. I want you to take some of the lines from the picture that Warren says to the girl when he was talking and put some weird music over them. Cut it into the movie right after Warren goes to sleep and when he wakes up, and it'll be a dream sequence. I say, okay. Now, he adds, we're going to call the picture Born to Kill, and we're going to make a new trailer, and we're going to put all these new scenes into the trailer and make it look like a picture with trucks and girls and tits and guns and all these things that really aren't in the movie, and we'll try to save the picture. He also cut out 15 minutes. He says, to Roger's credit, he tried to save it, but in saving it, he lost some of the best scenes, the more thoughtful ones. But the wonderful part of it was the way Roger refused to give up on a movie. Guys at the big studios give up, even on the expensive films, after 2 days. Roger, never.
Wow.
Yeah. So they had that. And actually on the DVD, there is a TV spot that at the very end has a little bit of that dynamite truck chase thing in it. Just a little bit, but it cuts off. It was reissued a few times under different names. It was also called Gambling Man, and my favorite of the titles, Wild Drifter.
Wild Drifter.
The Wild Drifter.
Oh, my God.
So, and they also, I guess, Hellman and his crew, when they heard it was going to be called Born to Kill, they jokingly would call it Hatch to Kill because
right.
roosters.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of amazing that this movie survived in the version that it's in now. Thinking about all the stuff that it went through, it's pretty astounding that it ended up surviving the way it has.
Yeah.
even as horrified as I am by it now, having researched it and watched it over and over, I still love it. I think Oates' performance is great.
Oh, yeah.
Stanton's great. Laurie Bird's wonderful. Charles Willeford, just wow.
Do you want to just go ahead and jump into Remake of Rembrandt now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rembrandt.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think it is.
This movie could not be made again anyway.
It couldn't be made again.
No.
There's no way. If they made it now, it would be
CGI chickens. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you know what it would be now? If they made it now, it would be one of those competitions where somebody creates a robot to kill another robot.
Right.
And it would suck.
Yeah, it'd be BattleBots the movie.
Yeah, and there'd be a dude who wouldn't speak until his bot with the big nail on the end of the arm would, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could remake this movie today. And I mean, if for nothing else, even if I did love the movie, even if it was so controversial it couldn't be remade, the poor movie's been through so much.
Right.
I wouldn't want to have a remake done by McG. You know what I mean? Or God forbid,
Brett
Ratner. I was just thinking, one of those two guys.
Yeah.
Guys where the making of documentaries are more interesting than their actual movies.
Right.
After the sunset, anyone. So yeah, I think it's a Rembrandt. Who could you even cast to be Warren Oates in this movie? I mean, maybe McConaughey, possibly, or maybe we'll say Timothy Oliphant.
Maybe.
I wouldn't mind seeing him try to do it, but I just don't even know.
I don't want either one of those guys to be mutes, though, because I just love the way they deliver lines.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it'd be a real exercise for an actor to do it, but Oates is so different than anybody else.
Right.
Even the most grizzled actor you can get a hold of nowadays, I don't know that they could stand up to him, but or maybe it's just somebody I can't think of right now.
I was thinking, would you go for an older actor like Sam Elliott, but I want to hear him talk too, so...
Yeah.
Maybe Sam Elliott could be the Omar character.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, the thing about Oates was that he looked older than he was, but he kind of played younger. There's something about him that was such a weird mix. It would just be really hard to replicate that. I don't think you could. I mean, I don't even know why I brought it up. You can't remake this movie. It's impossible.
Well, if all else fails and you are going to remake it, if you need to cast Oates' part, Kurt Russell.
Let's just turn this into a Kurt Russell podcast.
Welcome to the All Night Drive-In Kurt Russell show.
Yeah. We could do it. It could be done.
It could.
His filmography is just that deep. Oh, that'd be so great.
That's awesome.
We never have to work again. If you do what you love, you never work again a day in your life.
You never work again. Thank you for joining us at the All Night Drive-In Picture Show. We hope you enjoyed our double feature this evening. You can follow us on social media at the All Night Drive-In Picture Show page on Facebook or at All Night Drive-In on Twitter and Instagram. If you have questions, comments, or movie requests, you can send them to our email address at allnightdriveinpictureshow@gmail.com. We appreciate your patronage. Don't forget to hang up your speaker, and please drive carefully on your way out.
The All Night Drive-In Picture Show is edited and produced by Markham Harvey. Our theme song is composed and performed by Lee Rosevere and edited by The Night Watch. Our head ticket taker is Stubbs Jorgensen. Our snack bar manager is Lucy Slewfoot. Our sign master is Jason Baldwin. Our drive-in manager is the one and only George Jaike. I'm your announcer, Lane Hewitt. This has been a Clown Business Coalition production. Good night, everyone.